All right, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone. So first, we have a bill that we're going to take care of, and then we have a presentation from the Allentown Economic Development Corporation and its Executive Director, Mr. Unger. So, Mr. Hanlon, can you please read Bill 87 into the record?
Bill 87 amends Part 17, Building and Housing, Title I, Standards and Administration, Section 1705-039, Reciprocity, in the International Electrical Code to allow for a one-time exception for non-reciprocating electricians to obtain an electrical permit, and amend Section 7301, Permitting Certificate of Inspection, by requiring a qualified person to be present during an electrical inspection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanlon. I'm going to hand this over to the administration to give us a rundown on the bill.
Thank you. The purpose of this bill is a twofold issue that we've been coming upon. The first section that's being amended is 2703.0, and it adds that a qualified person shall be on site at all inspections in which a licensed electrician has been issued a permit. The inspectors in the field are noticing that when they are going out for inspections on permits that a contractor has pulled the licensing, that the contractor is not on site during the inspection. This raises an issue when the inspector finds deficiencies during the inspection and conveys technical knowledge to the majority of the time people who are not well versed in that technical knowledge. So it's a matter of making sure that the contractors are following up on their duties as contractors and providing the services that they should be serviced to the homeowners in most cases, so that any deficiencies are corrected in a timely fashion without kind of playing the game of telephone. The second part of this bill deals with the one-time exception. The electrical board feels that it's not prudent to necessarily punish qualified contractors who do very minimal business in this area. Just to give an example, is if major chains come into the area, they will often bring in sometimes their own contractors. The intent of this is for us to look at that contractor's licensing if it's from another state that has an equal or better code than ours, and make a decision whether they're competent. We don't see us using this much. This is just, again, to not punish competent contractors trying to do business in this city.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I'm going to open up to questions from the committee, which will be Ms. Alpha.
I don't see that I have this completely up. If a contractor comes in with his own electrician, you're saying it's okay, correct?
Well, the electrical, with regards to electrical, the electrical contractor is required to pull the permit. And in order to pull a permit, they need to be licensed by the city or by a reciprocating municipality. Once again, this is purely geared towards those who do not do consistent business in the city, to not punish them from having an outside contractor come in who is competent and qualified to do the work.
States that they are competent and qualified.
Well,
You guys
So
oversee it?
Well, currently our board of electrical board.
They
looks
go
at
over
their
the
qualifications.
application and.
They do. They have to make that decision.
And this, the certified inspector, this is to be on the premises when they are being inspected.
It's not, it's the licensed contractor should be on premise.
I'm sorry,
A licensed contractor should be on premise.
at all times.
Well, I
Well,
don't
they're
want to say
not-
all times, at least during the inspection.
Oh, okay, thank you. I have no other questions.
Thank you, Ms. Alpha. Do any of the members of council have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. My main question would be, this would in no way alleviate them from the, having that electrical license to do that type of work, correct?
The one-time exemption would for, like I said, the targeted contractors. They would still pay the one-time fee, a fee for licensing for the city. If they should choose to do another job in the city, they will be required to either have a reciprocating license or a license issued by the city.
But the work would have been done by a competent electrician.
Yes.
Right, it's just that
In
that
all
person's not
scenarios.
there and not licensed in the city.
Correct. In all scenarios, it would be done by a licensed electrician.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Ms. Slaughter, do you have any questions? Okay. I have a couple of very quick questions for you. When we talk about the on-site qualified person, we're including in this both residential and business, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And with any type of electrical permit that is pulled, and forgive me for my ignorance on this, but do we have a requirement that if an electrical permit is pulled, it has to be a certified electrician who does the work as opposed to a homeowner who would choose to do the work for themselves?
A building that is owner occupied,
Mhm.
in which the owner holds title to the building, not in an LLC or any other type of manner, they are allowed to pull their own permits.
Okay.
They're not prohibited from doing that.
So then would this also basically stipulate that they would be considered the qualified person in those instances?
In that instance, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, in that particular sense. When you say that when we're talking about the reciprocity, when we're talking about the one time, are we talking one time in a particular time or one time in life or?
This is a one-time lifetime, that's our
Okay.
intent.
All right. So the way I read it, the examiner's board has to sign off on this one-time exemption before anyone in the department does? Is that correct? Okay. And the only other question that I have is there a concern that we could be hurting the local contractors who might be hired for this work? If currently under the situation, they have to hire someone who's licensed in Allentown if there's no reciprocity, are we worried that we might be actually hurting contractors who've gone through the process to be licensed in Allentown?
With the intent of this, it hasn't been fully looked at from that perspective.
Is there?
From
Oh, I'm sorry.
our perspective, it's, as I said, it's meant to benefit, people who, like I said, are not in the city.
Okay. And Mr. Leitner, I see that you want to weigh in on this. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't see that as harming anybody that's locally licensed. A good example would be, like the Shantae 19th, when that TV show came in.
Correct.
They brought their crew. So there's no need to take them through that entire licensing process when they're just here one time and they're out. Especially for something like that where it was a 3-day, they're in and out and they're gone.
Sure.
So those are the type of things we're looking at. So from a local perspective, we're always gonna try to enforce or make sure that local contractors are hired. But those are one-off cases.
No, and that, in that particular instance, absolutely. Is there any way that you have or could develop to sort of track it to see if you get a large number of requests towards this, that maybe it would be being taken advantage of? Is there any way to track that?
Yeah, we can always track that.
Fantastic.
I think over last year, we might have had 2.
Well, and that's, I imagine this is a very rare instance, and I think it's good to close this. I just want to make sure that we don't have an unintended consequence of then potentially hurting any of our currently licensed contractors. The only thing, just for my own education that I have left is, and you sort of answered this when you were giving your presentation, but, so when we talk about the reciprocity that we currently have, or I'm sorry, anyone where there would also be reciprocity towards our qualified people. What are we talking about? Is that just within the Commonwealth? Are we talking about that could be in other states as well? I'm trying to basically get a sense as to who would be having that reciprocity with us and who would not, basically.
Other states.
Okay. All right. And the standard is that it is equal or higher?
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. I appreciate all the work you guys have put into this. I have no further questions. Thank you very much, and I'm going to open it up to the public. Just please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, Lou Shoup, 814 Walnut Street. I heard mentioned that the owner of a building would be capable of pulling permits. Now, if this law were to be enacted, would that also extend to owners of multiple properties or property managers to be able to pull permits?
Mr. Shoup, if I heard correctly, and please jump in if I didn't, gentlemen, it's owner occupied, and it has to be owned by an individual, not an LLC, not any type of corporation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that would only be that case, and my understanding is that's currently how it is as well, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so that doesn't change anything, this bill doesn't change anything in that sense. So, but thank you for your question, Mr. Shoup.
Glenn Hunziker, South Allentown. This is an interesting concept, I guess. I don't understand where it's gonna lead to. I don't know if you people do. I think you better look into this a little bit deeper. I mean, it might be a legitimate reciprocating, and we haven't had a list of who we're gonna reciprocate with. How many are there? So, I mean, you gotta look into this a little deeper than what you wanna do, so, I mean, that's all I'm saying about it. This is something new. Do they have a list?
Well, Mr. Hunziker, if you, in the copy of the bill, so the original section of the original ordinance, or excuse me, the original section of the building codes states that the Director of Community Development or designee will accept as master electricians valid licenses from other municipalities that also recognize Allentown master electricians licenses without formal testing, and in addition, all other classifications listed in this code, provided said municipality has a testing process, provided such licenses comply with all other applicable provisions of this code, including payment of the applicable permit fee. And the change would be going to stating that, and unfortunately it's between two different pages here, so I apologize. The Director of Community Economic Development or designee may recognize a master electrician license holder from a non-reciprocal municipality, provided that the applicant is deemed by the electricians board, to be similarly qualified and licensed by another jurisdiction to which licensing standards are equal or exceed that of the city of Allentown's. Any future permits applied by the applicant under this section will be required to obtain a city of Allentown electrical license or a reciprocal license. So basically, in the current ordinance that exists, we already have stated what reciprocity is with any municipality that will also recognize our licenses as equal for any of our master electricians.
Is this anywhere in the United States?
It's anywhere within the Commonwealth, correct?
Commonwealth only?
It is, from what we understand right now with the 15, we have 15 municipalities that do it right now in the Commonwealth, yes.
In the Commonwealth, okay.
Only?
Correct. So what this is basically, this
You didn't say
ordinance.
only, I just want to hear that.
No, yep.
Okay.
And then what this is doing is stating that on a one-time exemption. If someone comes in who would be from outside of those 15 municipalities or from outside of the Commonwealth, that on one instance, they could get approved by the electrical examination board and then also by the.
Is that one-time exemption on the name of the electrical contractor, or is it on the person themselves?
It would be, my reading of this is it's on the name of the contractor or the master electrician, is that correct?
If I may step in, yeah.
Sure.
It's licensing goes with the individual,
Mhm.
not with the corporation.
Okay.
Additionally, this was also brought about because our testing parameters have changed towards a nationally recognized testing platform. So it's it's through the International Code Council testing, which is, again, nationally recognized. With regards to states that we currently reciprocate with, I believe Connecticut is the only one. And we said about 10, 15 other municipalities in the city 10, 15 municipalities in the state recognize city of Allentown licensing for reciprocating.
Okay. Thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Mr. Hunziker?
I hope so. I'm not doing that work.
Thank you, Mr. Hunziker. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this bill? All right, then I will entertain a motion to forward this bill to the full council.
I'll entertain your motion.
Favorable?
Favorable.
Favorable. And I will second,
Thinking of something else. Okay.
and by common consent? Thank you. All right, Mr. Unger, if you would like to get ready to give your presentation.
Good evening. I'm here essentially because Councilperson Robinson asked that, it's been a long time, that probably since the 10 years I've been here, this type of presentation's never occurred. So I don't know how long it's been since you've had any type of presentation about AEDC and what we do and who we are. I'm Scott Unger, I'm the executive director. Also with me is Don Bernhardt, who's the chairman of the board, and Anthony Durante, who is our program manager and runs our incubation program. So thanks again for having me. And I think hopefully you'll see, I think we've got some positive things to talk about in our cooperation and things that we've done with the city, and things that we do with the city. So what is AEDC? I won't read all the bullets to you. You can do that for yourself, but we're a not-for-profit organization. We're independent of the city. We are not city employees. We're not municipal employees. And we are, it's somewhat cliche to say these days that it's a public-private partnership, but way back in '79, it was somewhat cutting edge, I think, to have a partnership between essentially, the private sector, the city of Allentown, Lehigh County, and Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corporation, which was added later because they were not in existence, I believe, in '79. Our board is comprised of 8 private sector members and 7 public sector representatives, including 3 of whom are in the room today. We have the mayor, Leonard Leitner, and Councilman Hendricks is the current representative from City Council on AEDC's board. And then again, like I said, there's some other public sector folks, both from the county and some other appointees, as well as 8 private sector board members. And AEDC has 8 full-time staff members. ACEDA is the Allentown Commercial Industrial Development Authority, which I'm also the executive director of. It's a different entity. It is a public body established in 1983. It has 5 board members. So yeah, if you're counting, I've got 20 bosses so far. The board of directors is composed of 5 Allentown residents appointed by the mayor and confirmed by council. And the thing that's somewhat unique that I can't take credit for, but I think is extraordinarily effective and beneficial, is that the staff and all operational funding for ACEDA is provided by AEDC. So essentially, AEDC uses the tools of ACEDA and the partnership with ACEDA to do some of our projects and to be able to have additional capabilities. So essentially, the city gets the benefit of having an industrial development authority at no cost. So we have 3 primary programs. AEDC has done a lot of things over the years, and we've worked pretty hard to try and kind of cull that down into 3 very specific things. We've actually tried to stop doing some things that were off mission over the years as well, too. So 3 primary programs are our Urban Made program, which is a business retention and expansion program. It's comprised of 2 basic principles. One is a lending entity, or lending program, which I'll go over first, and the other one is a visitation and expansion program. So we operate 4 loan programs presently. Of those 4 bulleted up there, the PMBDA program is for Lehigh and Northampton counties. The other 3 are specifically isolated to City of Allentown applicants. They all have slightly different parameters in terms of job creation and applicability of certain types of uses of certain funds, but they're similar. And we operate 1 loan committee that reviews all 4, and then all the loans ultimately go before the board of directors for final determination. So the whole loan pool in its entirety is just under $4 million. And you can see by the different colored pieces of the pie chart there, those are the 4 different programs that were on the previous slide. You can see that the PMBDA program and the EZ program are the 2 largest ones. Give you a brief overview of those 3. So the Enterprise Zone program is $1.5 million. We're showing current loans at just over $1 million. The red pie wedge at 130. Those are loans that have been approved but have not closed yet, simply because there's always requirements to complete certain things or hit certain milestones before we'll actually schedule a closing. So those are funds that are committed, and we're not going to commit new funds in addition to the committed funds and loans. Enterprise Zone pool was established probably over 25 years, of course, 25 years, I believe, long before I was here, in a series of 3 grants from the Commonwealth to the city's program. Those grants in their entirety, I think, were right around, the total would be just about $1.2 million. So you can see we've got more in the loan fund now than were provided by grants, simply because they cycle over and over again, and the interest goes back into the loan program. The PMBDA program is a slightly different scenario. We actually borrow these funds from the PMBDA, Pennsylvania Minority and Business Development Authority. PMBDA loans AEDC those funds, and we re-lend them out at a slightly higher interest rate to the borrower. Best of our knowledge, this is a $1.1 million program. To the best of our knowledge, this is the second largest PMBDA fund, second only to PMBDA's fund itself. I would suspect that Philadelphia and Pittsburgh have some other mechanism for funding projects like this, because I don't believe they participate in the PMBDA program. Otherwise, I would expect them to be the number two. But we have a pretty large and significant program. Again, that covers both counties. The city has an economic development loan that we operate on behalf of the city. That is $870,000. That used to be a lot larger, a somewhat larger number. It was about 6 years ago that, working with the previous administration, AEDC suggested that we eliminate the grant part of this program. It used to be loans and grants, low interest loans and grants. And we felt that if we wanted to keep this available to new applicants, obviously grant funding has a shelf life to it. So we haven't done a grant out of this program for at least 6 years. Again, you can see the loans outstanding, the committed funds, and available funding as well. And then finally, ADCO. This is a private corporation that AEDC formed with the assistance of a handful of banks quite a long time ago. And you can see the loan funds available there as well. So again, total loan pool of $3.9 million. Loans currently out on the street, about $2.2 million. We've got almost another $1 million committed, and about $801 available to lend. So keeping in mind too that this is mostly gap financing. So a lot of these projects have a primary lender, but because of the challenging nature of the project or the importance of the project, they're not able to fund it completely through a conventional lender. So a lot of times we'll step in for a smaller piece of that. And a lot of times these vary in length. I'd say the average loan term is about 5 years. So while we have 801 available now, with a 5-year amortization, a lot of funds come back every month, and so we obviously redeploy those. And that's, again, the purpose is to cycle this money over and over again to support, improved and additional business activity. And also, we focus very strongly on just improving the physical quality of Allentown's privately held real estate too, because obviously businesses move in and out of cities and municipalities, and we can't control that to a large degree, but we can try and make sure that the properties we have, particularly commercial properties, are in good condition and are of value, because then they'll be more likely to be occupied by another company in the future. So the other component, oops, too fast. The other component of the Urban Made program is we do retention and expansion visits as well. So much of our visitation is focused on manufacturing companies, and a lot of people don't realize that there's still about 200 manufacturers in the city of Allentown proper. Not mailing address, but city of Allentown proper. Now these are a lot smaller, a lot of them are only 5, 10, or 15 person firms, but manufacturing, just like it does in the Lehigh Valley, still plays a very significant role in the city of Allentown. Just a quiz, does anybody know what that photograph is? Of what business? No guesses?
Sounds like a former senator from New York.
The reason this is actually Bradley Pulverizer. This is the interior of Bradley Pulverizer, just to show that we have a lot of manufacturers that are right under our noses, but when you go inside, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of, they've got overhead cranes, and they're a large fabricator, and actually I think our second oldest manufacturing company. I think their roots go back to the late 1800s in the city. And also for this program, so we don't obviously visit all 200 every year. That would be nearly impossible to do, but we try and get out and visit as many as we can every year, and at least hit them all, or at least the significant ones every few years, for a number of things, not just to talk to them about, if they have any lending needs, but just to find out if there's any other issues that they have. And most of the time, I'd say 8 times out of 10, we can't solve the problem directly, but we can connect them to the Workforce Investment Board or the Public Works Department, or whoever the appropriate partner would be for us to try and bring a solution to support the manufacturing community. The other reason, and I'll talk, I could do an entire presentation about why AEDC feels manufacturing is important. I won't do that. But you'll see, we talk about little bits of it throughout. And one of the reasons is, when you compare manufacturing, and most of our real estate in the city is manufacturing and not warehousing, most of our industrial real estate, but the job creation per square foot of actual manufacturing space tends to be dramatically higher than that of a warehouse. Our second program is our business incubation program. This is operated out of the Bridgeworks Enterprise Center. Again, you can read some of the statistics. This is a small business incubator for startup manufacturing companies. Typically, these companies are fewer than 3 years old. And again, you'll see the significance of the focus on manufacturing technology based. So our historical impact since we opened the center in 1989, you can see there, I think the real highlight there is about 618 jobs were created or retained. Just in 15, we received the Pennsylvania Economic Development Association's Economic Development Program of the Year. And just a little less than a year ago, we received the IMBIA's Impact of Specialty Incubator of the Month. And I'll come back to that IMBIA award in a minute. Of the 61 companies, we have some additional information during the questions we can talk about it. But most of those companies, some stay in the city, most of them have stayed in the Lehigh Valley. Currently, we've got 9 companies, client companies and two anchor tenants in the building, in the program. And every year we do an impact survey, so Anthony will start doing that shortly to start collecting data from 2018. But of those occupants in our incubation program, you can see almost $5 million in revenue, 51 full-time employees, and about $1.7 million paid in wages. Business incubation again, so this is the IMBIA, which is the International Business Innovation Association. We've been members of that since 1988. There are about 1,200 member organizations globally, and most of those organizations operate an incubator or a program of that accelerator or some similar program. Of those 1,200 member organizations, less than 4% of them identify themselves as manufacturing based. And I think we'll explain why we think that is in a minute. And 67% of those 1,200 are funded by higher education or public funding sources. So in terms of our public funding source, we are part of the Ben Franklin Technology Partners network of incubators. There's about 13? One of 13. From 2010 till 2017, we didn't receive any funding from Ben Franklin because their funding had been cut. So we did receive $5,000 in both 17 and 18, but that's a relatively small percentage of our operating budget, which I'll show momentarily. So what does that mean? So in other words, we're essentially operating the hardest type of incubator to run, which is manufacturing. And the reason I say that is because if you have a technology incubation program, the physical plant requirements to expand that from a one-person firm to a two-person firm is you really need another laptop and another chair. For a manufacturer to expand or double in size, the amount of physical plant changes in terms of new equipment, machinery, possibly new power. I mean, one of our incubation clients came in and we had to add a 1,200 amp, 480 volt service to the building. That's a $50,000 investment, to be able to accommodate that business. So running manufacturing incubators are very challenging. So we run one of the toughest kinds with very, very atypically small amounts of either higher education or public sector support, and we do it exceptionally well. When I talked about the IMBIA award that we got about a year ago, one of the other member incubators that won in February of 2018 was for a company in Australia that had received a $20 million investment from Australia. So I mean, we're doing pretty well getting awards in a sea of pretty well-funded organizations. So, our last program is property management and land development. So a lot of people don't realize that essentially one of the key things ADC does is we're a not-for-profit land development and property management company. The one unique feature is that we only focus on really challenged sites that the private sector has virtually no interest in. So by result of that, we currently own, operate, or manage about 62 acres of property, 1.7 million square feet of real estate. 440,000 of that square footage is occupied industrial buildings, and we're working on just under 250,000 more. And as of this, I think that's 33 or 34 leases, right? We just picked up a couple more leases just over the last couple of days. In terms of completed projects, now I will indicate that we have had, our fingerprints are on all of these projects I'm gonna show you, but we've had varying degrees of involvement, some of which we've been the absolute at-risk developer from top to bottom of the project. Others we've simply assembled land for, and others maybe we simply, helped them secure some grant financing and assisted with them in the grant administration. You can see going back to '82, one of our first projects was the Hilton Hotel at 9th and Hamilton, going through some other significant projects, including PPL Plaza. This continues. Like, for instance, Fegleys Allentown Brewworks, I think we just assisted them with some RCAP grant work administration. But Bridgers by the Creek, we built an 87,500 square foot manufacturing building on spec, and we were the developer. We ultimately sold that as an industrial condominium, but we've stayed on to manage that property, so that's in our portfolio of properties that we still maintain. Ideally, when we develop a property, we like to sell it and not have to be involved, but, we look to make the project work, and that often takes different shapes. PPL Center, we were very, very involved with PPL Center, doing a lot of the land assemblage, remediation, demolition, and utility relocation, and some bulk earthworks. So we were very involved with PPL Center from the very beginning, and see a couple other projects that have came about since then. So in summary, I went back and did the best I could, going back through all the records back to '79. And in total, we've taken about 30 acres that were either heavily underutilized or completely vacant and put them back into productive use. And while we've eliminated rights of way, like PPL Center eliminated an entire block of, I'm gonna say Tall Street, in that, because that used to run, down the center of the block. So we've eliminated public rights of way, but we haven't, to my knowledge, added a single linear foot of public right of way. And that's important because we're adding, by doing our mission, we're adding economic activity and real estate land value to the city of Allentown without adding any liability of the city to perform additional maintenance and public rights of way. So we're not extending the infrastructure, we're reusing existing infrastructure that already exists. Projects in progress. Oops. These are just a few of them. Our biggest project we have in progress right now is Allentown Waterworks. We finished the remediation and demolition. We are in the process of doing design and permitting for the renovation of the first of 3 buildings, which will be 50,000 square feet. But overall, this is a 22-acre site. And I'll go back to Bradley Pulverizer is exactly the average size manufacturer in the city of Allentown. They're on about 1.5 acres. So having a 22-acre site of manufacturing put back into productive use is actually a significant, very significant piece of property. It will ultimately have about 205,000 square feet of buildings when complete. Total project cost about $22 million. But ultimately, we believe, you never know until the ultimate user goes in there, but our experience with our own buildings of similar size and configuration, we could expect the private sector to create upwards of 300 jobs in that space ultimately. Another project that's actually getting very close to being complete is the Klein building renovation being done by ACR Development. They are the owners also of RV Collection, which is a automobile restoration facility currently in Bryansville. They are partnering with America on Wheels to offer some really unique experiences for AOW's visitors. So they'll have their restoration facility there, as well as 7 really, really high-end, nice apartments. And all of that is scheduled to open in the first quarter of 2019. They have 8 full-time positions presently, and they're doubling their renovation space to about 8,500 square feet. So those are just some highlights of some projects in progress. Operating budget, we're on a fiscal year, so the year we're currently right about in the middle of, we're at just under 1.6 million for operating budget. And I differentiate because we rely very heavily on public grant funding for our capital projects, which we talked about, like Allentown Waterworks being ultimately a $22 million investment, although AABC does invest some of our own funds into these projects as well. But I'm specifying here, this is operating budget only. So for an operating basis, you can see the public support in green, it's about $27,500. In red, we pay $145,000 a year in real estate taxes and stormwater fees. So even, just by doing what we do, we generate revenue for the city of Allentown, not including the impact of all the projects that I listed previously. So that's about less than 2% of ADC's operating budget, and the picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you look at that graphically, there's the funding that we get publicly. That is about the best I can do in a short period of time to give you a highlight as to what ABC does, and at this point, and if I need Don or Anthony to assist in answering questions, they're here as well too, so if anyone has any questions, happy to answer.
First of all, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Unger, for coming and giving this presentation. I think it's important, not just for us, but I think for the public to understand not only the work that you guys have done, but more importantly, the unique nature of it, in that it's geared towards manufacturing, which is, you and I have talked about, but you've talked about extensively here, is unusual when you see these type of public-private partnerships. Before I have any questions, I'm going to open it up to the dais to see if any of my colleagues have any questions for you. I'll start with Ms. Office, since she's a member of the committee. Okay. Any other members have any questions? Okay. I just have a few for you, Mr. Unger. So when we talk about having about 200 manufacturing facilities throughout the city, how do we compare in regards to other municipalities, not just of our size, but in general, other urban municipalities? So I know you do a lot of work with these organizations, so you sort of get a picture as to what it looks like. Where do we compare with other?
Sure. The easy answer is above average. You know, we have a bigger manufacturing base than is typical for most municipalities in Lehigh and Northampton County. But and certainly Upper Macungie Township has a huge footprint in manufacturing. We have industrial park areas in the various municipalities that they're residing in have atypical, but then you get into other municipalities that just don't have a large manufacturing presence at all. LVEDC has been doing some really good data collection, and they found that the Lehigh and Northampton counties together, I believe, if I'm getting if I'm recalling the numbers correctly, the percentage of our GDP as the Lehigh Valley generated by manufacturing is about 16% of the Lehigh Valley's. National average is a little less than 13%.
That's great.
So just in Lehigh and Northampton counties, manufacturing makes up a disproportionate share of our GDP compared to the rest of the nation. So we still have a significant manufacturing community. The other information that LVDC points out is really useful too, that the other three highest sectors of our GDP are all, there's four that are relatively evenly balanced. So we have a very diverse economy, both regionally and within the city as well. I think the differentiating factor between like your Upper Macungie and your LVIPs is that we found that one of the key components of Allentown's successful nature of manufacturing is its urban nature, specifically because of the workforce accessibility. All three cities, Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, export a considerable percentage of their manufacturing workers outside of their urban cores. Right. So when we are able to capture and retain and grow urban manufacturing, it allows a much better availability of workforce and accessibility of that workforce to have manufacturing jobs. The Manufacturers Resource Center, Jack Funder has told me repeatedly and verified the numbers that a manufacturing, similarly skilled manufacturing sector job pays about 9% more than the same equivalent. You have a zero skill manufacturer versus zero skill service, about 9% more. But if you have to buy a car in order to get to the site, you're giving away more than the 9%. Right. The other thing that's beneficial about manufacturing is to my knowledge, it has one of the highest, and you can prove anything with statistics, but from my knowledge, it has one of the highest multipliers. So for every full-time true manufacturing employee, you have more spin-off. Keeping in mind, obviously a manufacturer, they have a copying machine, so if you're a service sector, you have a copying machine, so you have some copying contract with somebody coming in and service your machine. But if you have overhead cranes and interior equipment, you have all these other contractors and employers that have to service the manufacturing sector that aren't necessarily the case in the service sector side. So it has a bigger multiplier. And then the third piece is just kind of an overall environmental and financial sustainability piece. We're again reusing existing infrastructure. We have a manufacturing footprint here that goes back for more than 100 years. We have roads and electric and other utilities that have supported that. Rather than building new sprawling infrastructure to support manufacturing, what we do recycles the existing infrastructure that we have. So there's some that, again, I could continue on why manufacturing is, I think, important. Those are some of the highlights.
Who do you view as our primary competitors when we're looking at trying to attract manufacturing to Allentown specifically? Is it within the Lehigh Valleys, within the Commonwealth, or are we really playing on a nationwide or global playing field when we're looking at that?
I think all those things are important, but I would suggest that the question we should be asking is, what's the true risk to our being successful in manufacturing? And it's not our competitors. I actually think it's a competition for different types of land use. So we have some of our peers, like we work periodically with Kate Sophies in San Francisco. She founded an organization called SF Made. We work with Greenpoint Manufacturing in Brooklyn, and Brian Coleman is the director of that organization. And what's happened in Brooklyn and San Francisco is happening in Allentown too, just we're several decades behind. But what happens is other land uses push out manufacturing. So that's, I think, the true risk, not competition with other areas trying to attract manufacturers, but our ability to do that, to even compete, is to make sure we have available stock of manufacturing space. And I just did a real quick calculation, probably 8 years ago, working with Mike Heffley at the time, just to see over a 20-year period, how many acres had the city of Allentown rezoned to either a lower intensity of manufacturing or some other use entirely. It was close to 200 acres. And we need to stop doing that. That's our true risk. If we want to even have a chance of being competitive with other municipalities, it really doesn't matter who the competitors are. If we don't have available stock, we're not even in the game.
So then would you say that sort of the number one priority, at least for this body, is to avoid, if it comes in front of us, for any type of zoning changes away from industrial, we should avoid that at all costs?
In the 1970s, I didn't work for a firm in the 1970s, but a firm I worked for, in the 1970s, one of the urban planners there, named Glenn News, worked at Spot Stevens and McCoy. He wrote what I believe to be the first agricultural preservation zoning ordinance east of the Mississippi, at least. And he wrote that in the 1970s because that was very important then. It was becoming a trend to try and protect agricultural space. I envision what AEDC is trying to do is somewhat similar. We're trying to protect manufacturing space because it's very important to have a balanced community and environment. When you start narrowing your land use patterns, overly narrowing your land use patterns, you have a very focused and non-diverse tax base, and that creates a whole bunch of other problems that are far too complicated to get into right here. But I think that is the true risk, and we've seen it. I mean, every time I talk to my peers in San Francisco and Brooklyn, they're actually jealous of Allentown because you guys, if you close the barn door now, you still have cows in the barn when it comes to manufacturing. But and Kate struggles because to buy San Francisco real estate, because manufacturers don't pay, they can't afford to pay per square foot with alternatives. So the only protection is in the elected officials protecting that land use category. Because if the private sector does it, they'll just put it to what they feel the highest and best use is. And that might be the highest and best use for that site, for that developer. But for the economy of the municipality as a whole, what we've seen in other places is it over time skews away from manufacturing, and then that leads to other problems.
Well, absolutely. I think that's why during our comprehensive plan period, it's so important to focus on that. And I would say, I think looking at something like the Klein building is a good success story because we have this false dichotomy that it either has to be manufacturing or it has to be residential. But that's a good example of you can meld the two together and you get the most effective use and effective return on investment for a space. So I think looking at those type of partnerships might also be something that we as a body need to try and promote. The question I would next ask you is, what would you recommend to us? Because obviously, we are more of we're a legislative body. So we can't direct the way the administration can, but we can try and set a policy course. So in terms of how you see us moving forward currently, do you have any recommendations, or would you maybe like to come back with recommendations for any type of policy changes that we can make it more attractive for manufacturing in the city?
Sure, well, and we did, actually the city did, at our suggestion, a 3-phase reindustrialization study. The first phase of that was complete, I want to say in 2013 maybe. Looked at the city as a whole, and there's a bunch of recommendations in that study, and I know the administration's working with their consultant on the comp plan to make sure that those findings are incorporated. The second phase of that was a more focused look at the Little Lehigh Industrial Corridor that runs from Basin Street all the way out to Allentown Metal Works. And that was a focus specifically because despite AEDC's efforts to maintain the waterfront as manufacturing, because it was already industrially zoned, it was already rail served, it needed probably some investment to make it a higher use and higher type of manufacturing. We obviously are going to lose all that, have lost all that. We needed a place to replace some of it. So the phase 2 study looked at that, and the phase 3 study was a site-specific look at Allentown Metal Works. So certainly, we work with the administration every day trying to coordinate some of those things, and so certainly supporting the comprehensive plan and specifically things that focus on manufacturing, which I'm sure will be in it. Certainly look at those. And when we did that study, when the city issued the RFP, I think we got 15 responses from firms from Florida all the way up into New York. And of the 15 firms that do urban planning and design, I don't think any of them had any specific experience in looking at that question. So I think as a city, we were kind of ahead of the curve even then, asking the question, hey, how do we support our manufacturing sector? Because there wasn't a lot of people who could show that they had done a study that was similar. So yeah, if we have anything, we'll run that through the administration if they come back for recommendations. But I guarantee you, the comp plan will have some recommendations.
Oh, yes, no, of that I have no doubt.
And just a case in point, I mean, and I make the administration and Leonard aware all the time when we have things that happen, because I'm concerned about the cadence of the comprehensive plan.
Absolutely.
And so just while we're waiting for that to happen, A-Treat Manufacturing, came before the zoning hearing board and is now going to be a use storage village.
Right.
Not particularly the highest and best use in terms of manufacturing employees or anything else. So there's an opportunity that, it was a use, they came to us over a minor dimensional variance, but it's a use permitted by right.
Right.
So we didn't, in my opinion, we had lost an opportunity there. And then there's a facility, the Weaver Fuels on
Yes.
Sumner is coming in, and it's going to be I forget what that's going to be, but like a Dollar General or something like that. Again, it's, in my opinion, a lost opportunity to save or grow manufacturing. So my point is there's a level of urgency to protecting with zoning. I say this all the time, zoning is a very powerful but blunt instrument. It is not a scalpel, it's a club. But it's important still to make sure we protect the zoning districts to keep that diversity of use.
Excellent. And I would just like that, the most important thing that I see with the incubators is you have no idea what type of a sector you're going to create when you bring in some of these companies. I think a perfect example is we look at microbreweries, distilleries, and wineries. It was something where we had the Fagleys who made the initial investment in 2007, but that was it. We didn't have anything until Hijinks and Colony and County Seat started opening up. Now, all of a sudden, we have another microbrewery that has opened up on the south side, Salmon Pants. We have Gallows Hill, which has opened up about a year ago, distillery, and you also have Sleepy Cat Urban Winery. And to my knowledge, I think there's another microbrewery that's looking at a spot on the east side. So the reality is we sort of created an entire sector almost by accident. And that's the type of thing where I really am trying to recommend to everyone I talk to, which is these business incubators are unbelievably important. We need to pay attention because we have no idea what's going to be created. One of the things that, and I learned this years ago, but I think is interesting, is no one would assume that we have a company that works out of, at least last I knew they were selling Bridgeworks and Terra Group, that's a national defense contractor. So that's something that is, they have major contracts with the US military. That's not something that most people, if you pulled them off the street, would say, hey, is there anybody in Allentown who's a major defense contractor? They would not think that. So we need to recognize the positive benefits here and we do everything we can to support it. So I would just like to say thank you for doing this presentation. I'm sure we'll invite you back to do more as the course goes through. But is there anything else that you would like to add? I was going to ask Don if he wanted to come up and say something too. So thank you, Mr. Bernhardt.
Thanks, and I do want to chime in on that last question, and not in a real specific way. Scott mentioned that study, which is full of very detailed recommendations, but just more a 30,000 foot level comment, which is economic development's always about creativity and flexibility, and no two deals are the same. If you went through that list, it's not like you could say, well, this is the public sector's responsibility, this is private, you need to do this in every deal. But there are many cases that the city had to do some creative thing to make a deal happen. Asco Manufacturing used to be the city garage. I mean, this is ancient history, but it may be something like that you sell a city facility and move it and sell it to a manufacturer if that's what it takes to keep them. Bridgeworks Enterprise Center, one of the things that enabled that is the city guaranteed tax exempt bonds to finance the acquisition and the initial renovation. And that worked out in a way it never cost the city a dime. That guarantee was in place for many years, but the bonds were paid off from the revenue of the project and AEDC's revenue. And I'm not suggesting we're coming back with that kind of request anytime soon, but there are a lot of ways that we can work together creatively to make things happen. So as much as anything, let's keep the communication channels open. Daryl's a religious attendee at AEDC board meetings, so we'll stay in touch and we'll see what comes next, but there's a lot in the pipeline.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Bernhardt. I thank everyone from AEDC for coming and giving us this presentation. I thank my colleagues for their indulgence on it, and this meeting is adjourned. Well, there's not really a bill on this, but if you wanted to ask a question, Mr. Hirschman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Sure, Mr. Hirschman.
I want to go back to 2004 or 5, when I served in the city council, we transferred quite a few properties over to AEDC. I'd like to know the status of those properties. I'll get into the next question after that. Were any of those properties sold?
Which properties?
Well, we gave, I don't have a resolution.
Well, how about this,
There's
Mr.
about 20 properties we gave you.
Mr. Hirschman,
You
how about,
know what the argument is.
Mr. Hirschman.
You don't play like you don't know.
Mr. Hirschman, you have to address the dais.
Okay.
Those are the rules. You
In
sat here, sir.
2004 or 5, we were on the city council, we transferred about 20 properties to AEDC to South Florida City Council.
Okay.
And I'd like to know the status, if they're sitting on them, or what they're going to, or what are they doing with them?
Okay, well,
The
since,
problem is, we know we have a financial problem now.
no, I understand.
This way, we can provide additional revenue for the city of Allentown.
I think I know what he's referring to, but without, I can respond if you'd like.
Well, no, what I was gonna ask, Mr. Unger is, Mr. Hanlon, if you could go back and identify what those properties were and send an email to Mr. Unger to get a status on all those properties, and once we have that back, we can provide that to Mr. Hirschman.
And
Thank you. Oh, yeah, absolutely, it'll be provided to the public, but since you specifically asked the
My next
question.
question is, as you know, Governor Wolf created 10 opportunity zones in Allentown, and I think one or two of those properties we transferred, Mr. Unger. What is the status? Is AEDC involved with the Mercedine City Opportunity Zone? There's 10 properties.
Well, I think it's 5 in the cities, 5 or 6, Mr. Unger, opportunity zones.
Their entire census, the zones are entire census tracts.
Right, that's what I'm saying, the census tracts is 5, I believe, isn't it? 5, okay. If you wanted to come up and address that when Mr. Hirschman's finished, I'll
Is
let you do
AEDC involved with the Mercedine Zone?
that. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hirschman. Oh, yeah, if you have another question, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, one other. The charter, he says he manages 30 properties. I think the city council created the AEDC charter. Does it in the charter say anywhere where you can manage properties? Other than, I mean, you can't go and manage private properties, business properties. Where did, I'd like to see the charter that says it gives AEDC the opportunity to do what they're doing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hirschman. Mr. Unger, if you want to answer the question about the census tracts, please go ahead.
I can give a little feedback on all 3.
Surely.
As far as AEDC's articles of incorporation, AEDC was not created by the powers of the city of Allentown. It's a 501c3 not-for-profit. Our articles of incorporation don't even restrict us to operate within the city of Allentown. Certainly, there's no prohibition on us managing properties. We tend to manage properties that are projects of ours or for other not-for-profits. So we certainly don't intend to compete with the private sector on managing properties. As far as opportunity zones, yes, some of the properties that we are currently marketing, one of the properties, I think it was 2007, which is why I'm confused. I think 2007, again, was before me. There was an ordinance passed by the city by which I think about 12 properties. 6 of the parcels were parts of the incinerator site.
Right.
So it was actually a much smaller list than it appeared because we've consolidated the incinerator site into one lot. That is in the opportunity zone. We have been marketing it for a combination of manufacturing use and park use. Some of the other properties, like the Pioneer Firehouse, that has been sold. There was 801 Ellsworth that we sold, and again, the proceeds went to the city. The vast majority of the other properties were either like a vacant lot next to a row home, and many of them that we investigated, 3 or 4 of them were deed restricted in perpetuity for recreation. So there was really, while we could have taken them from the city, we never took title to them because there was just no path to the future development that we could find relative to that. So I think those were the 3 questions.
Yes, the charter, the properties that were conveyed, and the opportunity zones.
we're working with City Center and the city and the Urban Land Institute to try and make sure we capitalize on opportunities, using the opportunity zone.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. Thank you. Mr. Hahn, you can just state your name and address for the record, please.
Tom Hahn, east side of Allentown. Because we're doing a little investigation, and I was at the meeting here, and to clear what was said, there was loans made at that time where 10% of the property sold would go to pay off the bond. And it was part of the 205 stabilization money or the lockbox money. And in there it stated that when the city sold the property, or whatever connection it is to this group now, that money would go toward paying off that loan. And what struck the bell is when they were talking about it, and it was mentioned about that bond that was said, and then if that was when the city moved in to the Mack Truck property and put their offices in, or did that, or who actually owns that? Does the city own that now? Are they renting it where the, offices are? So if you could ask Mike to, when he's researching, to find out all that's in there, just as public record, so we know what happened or what transpired, and if in fact that money was somewhere or owed. And the other thing was that I thought while they were talking, they explained everything, and the property that's on 10th Street, and the city has a problem with equipment being in a flood zone, that maybe another swap of a flood zone land and have the equipment brought up to 10th Street or where across the street from Mack Trucks, that would be an opportunity to save us the equipment and all the things that are going on. So I was looking at a big picture of what's going on, and maybe we've discovered something with the report that we have.
Okay, I asked Mr. Hanlon to look into that for you as well, Mr. Hunt. Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.
We have, the Parks and Rec meeting scheduled for 6:30. We can take a 5-minute break.